What if I told you that the greatest power in the world, the one that dictates economy, culture, and even wars, simply does not appear in the most prophetic book of the Bible? Strange, right? Well, the Apocalypse speaks of Babylon, Rome, Israel, but when it arrives in America, absolute silence. This cannot be an accident. Perhaps it is precisely one of the greatest prophetic enigmas that few are paying attention to. Many people think that America's destiny is guaranteed by its military strength or its global influence, but the prophecy shows that empires fall in a matter of hours. Rome fell, Babylon collapsed. Who guarantees that America is not on the same path? What if this silence is, in fact, a hidden cry of warning for the days we are living? That's the point. Either America is the eagle that protects Israel for a time, or it's the new Babylon destined for a sudden collapse. In any case, what is at stake is not only geopolitics, but the faith and preparation of each person who understands the signs. And here's a shock: if God really left America out of the final narrative, perhaps it's to show that the only real protection is not in human systems, but in Him. Now, before continuing, I want to invite you to dive with me into this analysis. Don't expect to hear what everyone else says. Here you will find a different, bold, and perhaps uncomfortable vision. But it is exactly in this discomfort that transformation is born. After all, if America can be absent in the apocalypse, what does that mean for your life, your choices, and your faith today? Many people read the apocalypse and wonder, why do so many nations appear by name, but America does not? The prophecy mentions Babylon, Rome, Israel, but it does not speak directly of the current greatest power. That's where the eagle image comes in. In Revelation 12, when Israel is persecuted, the woman is given the wings of a great eagle to flee from the dragon. This ignites an enormous curiosity. Is America, with its national symbol being precisely the eagle, hidden there between the lines of the sacred text? Now, think with me. Historically, America has always positioned itself as Israel's protector. It was no coincidence that in 1948, when Israel declared its independence, America was the first to officially recognize the new state. This is no small thing. It is a prophetic movement. Since then, wars such as Yom Kippur and even the most modern support with the Iron Dome have come. Every time Israel needed support, there was America, like wings spread over a small but central nation in the divine plan. And if you stop to think about it, the symbology of the eagle is not new. In the Bible, God compares His own protection to that of an eagle tending its young, as in Exodus 19 and Deuteronomy 32. In other words, the image does not speak only of a specific nation, but of a tool used by God. He can act directly, but He can also raise up whole nations as instruments of His care. It is like when someone uses a hammer. The power is not in the hammer, but in the hand that drives it. But here comes an interesting detail. America has not only military power, but also logistical power. Have you ever wondered what it means to be able to transport millions of people in the event of a global emergency? If at any time Israel needed to flee to a refuge like Petra, Jordan, the only nation with that capability would be America. It even sounds like a movie plot, but it is the strategic reality behind geopolitics. But, and here is the delicate point, nothing guarantees that this role will last forever. An economic collapse, internal divisions, or even a war could change everything. If the prophecy shows the eagle as a temporary support, this would explain why, later on, America disappears from the prophetic scenario. It's as if God says, I can use this nation, but not forever. And then another very intriguing interpretation arises, linked to an even darker figure. When one looks back, it is evident that America not only supported Israel, but literally paved part of the way for its survival. In 1948, when the young Jewish state declared independence, the first official recognition came precisely from America. This was not just a diplomatic gesture, it was a prophetic sign of alignment. While other nations hesitated, the eagle was already spreading its wings, and it didn't stop there. Think of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Israel was at real risk of disappearing, but planeloads of American supplies arrived in record time. It was like watching a prophecy being enacted in real time. To this day, when we talk about defense systems like Iron Dome, funded largely by America, we see how unique this partnership is. Few nations extend so much protection to another without expecting immediate return. This also shows something practical. Alliances change destinies. Just as Israel had crucial support in America, we also need to discern who our prophetic covenants are on a day-to-day basis. For example, a young person who decides to be around wise mentors can completely change the course of his life. In the same way, an entrepreneur who chooses the right partners can avoid bankruptcy. The key is to observe who is willing to support you even when there is no apparent advantage. Interestingly, this relationship shows that the world political landscape is not just about human power, but about prophecy in motion. Every support, every speech, every vote in the UN Council, all of this carries a spiritual weight. It is as if there were an invisible board where the pieces are moved according to greater divine plans. In Cissenza, America has always been strategically positioned. But does this role of guardian remain firm? Some say yes, but recent signs show fragility. Internal divisions, economic crises, even the very confidence in government seem to be shaking America's position on the world stage. What if this support was just a temporary chapter within a larger storyline? It is precisely this question that leads us to reflect on the symbology of the eagle. The eagle, in the biblical narrative, was never just an imposing animal. She always carried a spiritual weight, a message of protection and strength from above. In Exodus 19, God says that He led Israel on eagle's wings. And in Isaiah 40, we see the promise that those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength and will mount up with wings like eagles. Isn't it fascinating how a simple symbol can cross centuries and stay alive to this day? Now, think of the parallel with America. Its national emblem is precisely the eagle, a detail that seems too prophetic to be a coincidence. When Israel is persecuted, the Bible shows that the eagle appears as an instrument of escape and protection. Isn't God showing us that He can use even a modern superpower as a tool in His hands? It reminds us that, at the end of the day, it's not about America itself, but about the divine hand that moves history. And here is an object lesson. Too often, people put their trust in human systems, government, economies, technology. But when these collapse, the one who really sustains it is God. It's like in a company, you can have the best partners, the best product. But if there is no wisdom and grace sustaining it, everything falls apart. Hence, trusting only in the earthly eagle can be dangerous. The focus should be on the protector acting behind the symbol. The curious thing is that the eagle has unique characteristics that reflect divine care, long-range vision, ability to fly above storms, fierce protection over its young. It is not for nothing that God chose this animal as a metaphor for his protection. It's as if he says, I see before you see, I protect before you realize, I prepare the way before the storm comes. This generates confidence in those who read the prophecy. But this interpretation also opens an intriguing loophole. If the eagle can be seen as a representation of America, it implies that its role is not only political, but spiritual. The question that remains is, how long will this alliance between symbol and reality be maintained? Because if it is temporary, as we will see later, the prophetic silence about America may have an even darker explanation. America did not become the world's greatest military power by chance. Its power of mobilization, global reach, and ability to intervene in any region place it as a true eagle with wings spread over nations. When we look at Israel, it becomes even more evident. At critical moments, American protection has been decisive, not only with weapons, but also with technology and strategic intelligence. It is as if there is an invisible thread connecting these two countries and the logistics then. Few people stop to think about it, but America has a transport and rescue capacity unprecedented in human history. Imagine the scene in a future prophetic crisis where millions needed refuge. Who else would be able to intervene quickly? This possibility connects the biblical narrative with sites such as Petra, Jordan, which many scholars believe to be a refuge prepared by God. It's no wonder that so many people see parallels between the eagle of the apocalypse and America. This scenario teaches us something practical about preparation. It is not enough just to have resources, it is necessary to have structure. For example, an entrepreneur may have capital, but if he does not have logistics and strategy, his company will not go far. In the same way, families preparing for difficult times do not focus only on money, but on support networks, action plans, and even food storage. The lesson here is clear. Protection is not improvisation, IT is planning. But behind this military and logistical structure, there is a spiritual dilemma. Is all this strength just a historical coincidence, or is God using America as a temporary instrument in his prophecy? The question becomes even more intense when we think of Revelation, a book full of symbols and metaphors, but also of concrete events. Nothing is there by chance, and perhaps America's direct absence is precisely an indication that its role is temporary. What if this support is only an interim chapter? What if the eagle that protects Israel today cannot keep its wings spread forever? This is where we enter dangerous terrain, where the words collapse and fall begin to take shape. And it is at this point that the prophetic silence becomes even more intriguing, leading many scholars to raise a second theory. Looking at history, it is clear that God has always raised up nations to fulfill specific roles, but he has never let any of them remain at the center indefinitely. Persia, Rome, Great Britain all had their peak and then their decline. America may well be on the same route, called to protect Israel at a crucial moment, but not destined to hold that post until the end of the tribulation. This would naturally explain his silence in the apocalypse, and reality is already showing signs of this. The risk of an economic collapse, internal political divisions, and even the loss of global influence are clear indicators that the eagle's empire may have its days numbered. It's like an imposing building, but full of internal cracks. On the outside it looks strong, but inside it already carries the seed of fall. And if history repeats itself, as it so often does in the Bible, it is only a matter of time before the unexpected happens. This leads us to reflect on something very practical. In whom or what are we placing our trust? If one bets all one's chips on governments or human systems, one risks being disappointed when the 1 hour drop happens. It's like investing all your money in a single stock on the stock exchange without diversifying. Collapse can come and take it all at once. So it is wise to learn to depend on something, or rather, on someone that cannot be shaken. Interesting to note that if America really is the eagle of Revelation 12, its protective role may just be a preparation for something bigger. God can allow Israel to feel, at a certain moment, the absence of human allies and then experience true supernatural protection. It is like when a father takes off the training wheels of the bicycle. The child is afraid, but he learns to depend on the balance given by him. So too is Israel's prophetic journey. And it is precisely in this space of doubt and possible falls that an even bolder and more provocative theory emerges. What if America is not just a temporary eagle, but, in fact, modern Babylon itself hidden in the apocalypse? This is the second hypothesis that arouses heated debates among scholars and spiritual leaders. When Revelation Schrijfland chapter 17 and 18. The picture is frightening. A superpower that dominates militarily, controls the global economy, and exerts devastating cultural influence over nations. Many look at this text and see America reflected as in a mirror. After all, who else today fits this profile? It is not an exaggeration to think that prophetic silence may actually be a disguised revelation. The description is detailed: unprecedented luxuries, intense maritime trade, unbridled pride, and a self-sufficiency bordering on arrogance. It's almost impossible to read this without remembering the symbols of American culture: Hollywood exporting lifestyles, Wall Street influencing world markets, and its military power spread across bases on every continent. When the text speaks of nations intoxicated by the influence of Babylon, it is not difficult to associate it with the cultural waves coming from America. And what does this teach us? That influence, when used without responsibility, can be fatal. Just as America exports culture, you also export something every day: your words, your attitudes, your examples. If this influence is good, it transforms environments. If IT is toxic, it can intoxicate relationships and careers. It's like a leader in a company. He can inspire or corrode, depending on what he transmits. The prophecy warns of precisely this danger. Another important detail is the sudden collapse described in Revelation 18. In 1 hour his destruction came. This echoes the vulnerability of any human system, no matter how grand it may seem. An economic crisis, a cyber attack, an unexpected war. Everything can fall apart in a matter of moments. The great lesson here is never to confuse apparent stability with eternal security. Earthly power is always fleeting. And if we are indeed seeing in America the traces of modern Babylon, this leads us to an even more serious reflection. To what extent does God allow empires to grow only to then use them as examples of judgment? This line of thinking paves the way for us to analyze how he has always worked through the great empires of history, fulfilling his purposes in surprising ways. When John describes prophetic Babylon, he lists characteristics so specific that they seem almost like a spoken portrait of a modern superpower. The first is unrivaled military dominance. No nation these days has as many bases scattered around the world as America. Its firepower, its naval fleet, its air capability, all of this places it as the eagle that dominates the skies. You can't ignore this direct parallel to prophecy. The second characteristic is global economic control. Just look at Wall Street. A significant drop there causes a domino effect on the entire planet. Banks, currencies, oil, technology, everything revolves around the American economy. If one day there is a collapse in this system, the impact will not only be local, it will be global. This perfectly echoes the image of Revelation, where the fall of Babylon shakes all the nations that depended on her. The third is cultural intoxication. Movies, music, fashions, ideologies, ... all exported from America to the rest of the world. It is impressive how even American idioms are already part of the vocabulary of distant countries. This cultural influence can be positive, but it has often been destructive, eroding values and promoting excesses. It is exactly what the prophecy describes, nations drunk with the wine of Babylon. The fourth and fifth characteristics are linked. The maritime and commercial empire, along with unprecedented luxury. Busy ports, controlled trade routes, consumption at astronomical levels, all point to a society that lives in excess. Just enter any American mall to feel this reality. Prophecy does not condemn wealth per se, but the pride and self-sufficiency that come along with it. And finally, the seventh characteristic, the sudden collapse in an hour. This is the scariest one. Imagine waking up on a normal day and suddenly seeing an entire structure fall to the ground. The Bible shows that this is the inevitable fate of any empire that sets itself up as absolute. And if America really is this prophetic Babylon, then her destiny is already mapped out. But before we conclude, we need to understand the pattern that God has always used with the nations. If there's one thing history makes clear, it's that God has always used powerful nations as temporary instruments. Persia freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity. Rome, even though it was oppressive, opened roads and established peace that allowed the gospel to advance. Even the British Empire, centuries later, played an important role in the return of the Jews to the Promised Land. Each of these empires had its time, shone brightly, and then left the scene. America seems to be following exactly this pattern. It was raised up with a mission to sustain Israel, protect its interests, and serve as a shield in times of tribulation. But like other empires, it may be living only a temporary chapter in the grand narrative of prophecy. This view helps to understand why Revelation is silent about its fate. Perhaps its function ends before the climax of the story. And this brings practical learning to our lives. How often do we place permanent expectations on temporary things? A job, a relationship, a phase of financial stability, and suddenly everything changes. It's like relying on an umbrella in the middle of a hurricane. He even holds at first, but does not resist for long. Therefore, it is essential to learn to differentiate what is temporary from what is eternal. This pattern also shows that God does not depend on a single instrument to accomplish his plans. He can raise up a nation, a leader, or even an ordinary person to accomplish something great, and then replace it with another resource. It's like a conductor who changes instruments according to the music. The melody continues even if the trumpet gives way to the violin. Such is divine sovereignty in the course of history. And here comes a warning. If America is really just another temporary piece on the board, its absence in the apocalypse becomes understandable. But it also pushes us to a greater reflection. Whom, after all, should believers trust when these systems fall apart? This question leads us directly to the next point, which talks about an urgent call for all those who are attentive to the signs. The prophetic silence about America should not be seen as an irrelevant detail, but as a direct warning to believers. The message is clear. No nation, no matter how powerful, can take the place of divine protection. The eagle may offer shade for a while, but when the tribulation comes, only the shelter of the Most High will suffice. It is at this point that prophecy touches the heart, showing that human systems always fail. The big mistake would be to blindly trust political alliances or military giants. History shows that empires fall overnight. If America, with all its power, can face sudden collapse, what about smaller governments? The lesson is simple. Believers need to learn to depend on something that doesn't fall apart. And this is not theory. It is daily practice, praying, watching, seeking discernment, standing on eternal principles. Want to see a practical example? Just as an investor diversifies his portfolio so as not to depend on a single stock, the Christian needs to learn to diversify his confidence. It doesn't mean having multiple gods, but rather not putting your faith in fragile structures. Praying every day, meditating on the Word, creating a solid spiritual life. These are actions that shield the mind and heart from the fear of collapse. It is like having spiritual reserves for times of crisis. This warning is also a call to courage. Many believers, when they see the world scene, are paralyzed with fear. But the prophecy was not written to cause panic, but to generate preparation. Instead of despairing at the fall of empires, the true disciple looks up and remembers, "My citizenship is in heaven." This perspective changes everything, because it takes the weight of the present and puts the focus on the eternal. But the most challenging thing is that, when noticing this alert, each one needs to make a decision to continue trusting in human systems or to surrender once and for all to God's supernatural protection. This choice is urgent because the signs are increasingly clear. And by opening this reflection, we enter directly into the central point of our journey. After all, did God forget America in the apocalypse? If everything we've seen so far is true, then you can't ignore the signs anymore. The prophetic silence on America is not just about international politics, but about where each of us places trust. And then I ask you, have you placed your hope in systems that can collapse in an hour, or in the protection of a God who never fails? Look at your life today. If tomorrow there were a global crisis, would you be spiritually steadfast, or would you be swallowed up in fear? This is the kind of reflection that separates those who only read the prophecies from those who really live prepared. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if America is the eagle or Babylon. What matters is whether you're under the wings of the Most High. And here's a provocation. Are you living as someone who has already understood the signs? Or as someone who prefers to close your eyes and hope nothing happens? You can't sit on the fence. The decision needs to be made now, not when the tribulation knocks on the door. Prophecy is not an enigma for scholars. It is a call of urgency for all of us. So, answer within yourself. If God has removed America from the prophetic map, isn't He calling you today to remove from your life everything that is nothing but illusion? Think about it seriously. Change starts with small daily choices, and you have the chance to rewrite your destiny. And before you leave, you already know, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This way you continue to learn, reflect, and prepare for the times we are living in. After all,